Breaking tonight, just over 24 hours after the director of the FBI recommended no criminal charges for Hillary Clinton, and the U.S. Attorney General declares that the investigation into Mrs. Clinton's emails is officially over. But Congress says not so fast, demanding that both James Comey and Loretta Lynch step forward and answer questions. Good evening and welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Tomorrow we will see the first of two high-profile hearings, as a Republican-led Congress demands to know how an FBI investigation can find that Secretary Clinton did so much wrong in the handling of top-secret information, but does not qualify for prosecution. But even before the questions begin, Team Clinton is dismissing this as a partisan attack, echoing some of the same arguments we have seen for nearly a year and a half now. It was 16 months ago when Hillary Clinton held her most extensive press conference to date on the controversy surrounding her use of a private, off-site email server while she was at the State Department. As we showed you last night, many of the claims Mrs. Clinton made during that presser were contradicted in stunning fashion by the FBI. At the start of that news conference, Mrs. Clinton painted herself at the time as a cooperative partner with investigators.
My direction to conduct the thorough investigation was to err on the side of providing anything that could be possibly viewed as work-related. That is the responsibility of the individual, and I have fulfilled that responsibility, and I have no doubt that we've done exactly what we should have done.
You know, the Spy the Lie guy, Phil Houston? He says it's not only not making eye contact, but when you say, I have fulfilled that obligation, that is what they call a tell, right? I have fulfilled the obligation, right? Mrs. Clinton's surrogates and even her husband derided those who doubted her claims, like the one you just saw right there, as part of a right-wing conspiracy against her. Similar tactics the Clintons used throughout the 80s and 90s.
Is all this part of a vast right-wing conspiracy, then? Is it just the same old that always happens to them?
It's just mostly, you know, stupid media people talking to other stupid media people, making stuff up and spinning themselves up on something that's not going to amount to a hill of beans.
Republicans are trying to take this fact-finding expedition into a partisan exercise meant to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign.
This email thing became the biggest story in the world. I have never seen so much expended on so little.
Stupid media people are to blame. Right? Then Mrs. Clinton and her campaign shifted toward downplaying the matter altogether, noting past State Departments used similar practices, according to her, even adding what we now know to be a misleading statement about retroactive classification.
It was not prohibited. It was not in any way disallowed. And as I've said, and as now has come out, my predecessors did the same thing, and many other people in the government.
We find ourselves in the same situation as Colin Powell and Condi Rice's top aides, and having emails retroactively classified. And as Colin Powell said, to some extent, this is an absurdity.
An absurdity. An absurdity, except the FBI director said everything she said in that soundbite was not true. 2 months later, when a State Department Inspector General's report sharply criticized Mrs. Clinton's email practices, Team Clinton again said it was not her fault, but the fault of practices already in place there.
I think a big reason why the report finds that it was unacceptable and fell short for her to be using this habit of copying her aides on her correspondence was because it turned out that the record keeping in place at the State Department was so poor.
But remember, Director Comey said that should never have been the case, and said that, quote, none of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, and that she should have known that. Well, the next day, Hillary Clinton offered an apology of sorts, but again claimed this was common practice as she saw it.
This report makes clear that personal email use was the practice for other secretaries of state. And I know that because it is well known, it's pointed out in the report. But it was still a mistake, and as I've said many times, if I could go back, I would do it differently.
It was still a mistake. right? It took a lot to get her to say it was a mistake. For weeks she didn't say that. Then she finally said it was a mistake. After it was announced that Director Comey would not recommend charges against Mrs. Clinton, despite a devastating rebuttal of her many claims from that March 10th presser, her supporters said, time to move on.
The most important thing that happened today was Hillary Clinton moved past a legal cloud, and that gives her and the voters the chance to say, could we talk about the issues that matter to the voters?
Like honesty? That is something that matters. Maybe. I don't know. Then yesterday, when it was announced that the House GOP wanted to hold a hearing to examine Mr. Comey's findings, the campaign came full circle, again reverting back to charges of a partisan witch hunt, with national spokesman Brian Fallon tweeting, Benghazi committee probe ended with partisan thud. So, of course, House GOP wants to launch new goose chase, this time about Comey and emails. Joining me now to discuss it all, Chris Steyerwalt, our Fox News digital politics editor, and Howie Kurtz, host of Media Buzz. I should have gotten Phil Houston. No offense. We needed the spy the lie guy. He ran the CIA's interrogation program for 25 years. And, you know, it's just, you know, that it's just a tell. You have to look for clusters. It's a long story. You should buy his book, Spy the Lie. Steyerwalt.
I'm not offended at all by what you did.
I'll just start with this. It's actually not, the 2 points that we made in the intro are not inconsistent. She could have been misleading, and she could have been caught by Director Comey misleading, and Brian Fallon might be right as well, that it's a partisan witch hunt to continue hearings. What's your view?
Well, look, the Republicans want hearings because they want to keep talking about this, and so is it partisan? Sure, that's why we have a partisan system. We have a competition. Why did Democrats go after George W. Bush in a way that they didn't go after Bill Clinton? Because he was a Republican. That's how this system is supposed to work. But to call Director
Comey before, it's like, it's suggesting they don't trust Director Comey. I mean, for weeks they've been saying that they trust him. He's a straight shooter. They're going to trust his recommendation, and now that it's not to their liking, it's like, bring him before Congress.
Well, it's something to do, and we know how this movie usually ends. It usually ends with the Republicans do what they do, Clinton and the press. And again, you mentioned to the 1980s. This is the playbook. This is always how it goes. You wait for the Republican. You start out, you deny. It was not me. I was not there. I didn't sell the pardon. I didn't have sex with her. I didn't. Whatever it is, this did not happen. And then incontrovertible evidence is put up your snout, and you go, well, something happened. Sorry, a little bit. And then you do the modified limited hangout. You back it down. You knock it around a little bit. But all the while, you attack your accuser and destroy your accuser, so that by the time you get to the end, people say, can't we just move on.
It's old news.
Move on. And
let's talk about something the American people care about, Howie Kurtz, we just heard. I mean, look, they may or may not care about Hillary Clinton lying. They may or may not care about her emails. But dishonesty is something we poll about after every primary. At least the pollsters still believe it matters. You know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But move on. People don't care, is her position now.
Well, speaking on behalf of stupid media people, when I covered the Clinton White House scandals, there was this playbook, as Chris says, and it was more than just deny and delay. It was also stiffing the press by saying there's an ongoing investigation, so we can't talk about it. Only media people care. The public doesn't care. I mean, give an inch or two when you have to. And then when the probe was over, declare the story to be old news, and then try to discredit your adversaries as partisan, and then continue to avoid the press. Hillary Clinton, as you know, has not held a news conference this year, and yet, and I see no sign that she's about to do so. As these questions build up about her veracity, she should welcome an opportunity to talk about this, because otherwise it will just be the Republicans talking about it.
They came out there and said, oh, anything that, first she said there was no classified information, which was not true. And then she comes out and says, well, anything that was classified only retroactively, so I didn't know at the time. And when people said, that's not true, the reports we're getting is that you knew it was classified. John Podesta, you know, her senior campaign guy, comes out there and says, that's an absurdity. Anybody who questions her that, you know, she did something different than Colin Powell, that's an absurdity. Well, not according to the director of the FBI. And now we're told, would you just move on, you partisan witch hunt people, Steyerwalt?
Well, you know,
You partisan witch hunt people, rotten. The problem for Republicans, and I think you put it together right there, which is you say, if you discredit Comey in this investigation, you discredit Comey and his findings that she engaged in heinous, beyond heinous electronic hygiene, and she took these risks and she did all that stuff. So you can't say this is all wrong, Comey's all wet. Which, if you want to keep the part of Comey that's helpful for Republicans, you can only go so far in discrediting him. And the thing they're going to be asking him about is, were you pressured? Were you pressured? I think it's highly unlikely that he's going to sit in front of Congress and say, boy, now that you guys mention it, this is all a fraud.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck trying to make Director Comey sweat. But we'll report back to you tomorrow night. Guys, good to see you both.
You bet.
Joining us now, Mo Alifi. He's the former traveling press secretary for Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign. Mo, good to see you. So,
hey,
let's put the Comey thing to the side for a minute, right? Because I heard all of the people say, straight shooter, you can trust him. We're going to go with what he said. Now they don't like the end conclusion. It's, you will appear. You will. People are saying he's got to step down. It's like,
right, what's
really?
wrong with that guy?
Okay,
right.
But, you know, he did start off by saying, lie, 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 lie. And to look back on how her campaign and her surrogates, like Hillary Rosen, spun it, you know, even today, saying, move on. You know, people don't care. It's offensive. Does it offend you on any level?
You know, this is one of those situations where, look, you know, full disclosure, you said it. I used to work for her, and I'm a fan of hers. But look, this is one of those cases where I actually wish both sides were just we're a little better right now.
Right.
You know, I think the Republicans are just the way they're going after it. I get it. We're in the middle of an election season. They don't like her. They made that very clear. This also gives them something other than Donald Trump to talk about, which they desperately want and need right now. But I think, as we talked about, they're stepping on their own message.
Because it gives her the chance to play the victim. I mean, it gives her the chance to come out either by, you know, through herself or through surrogates to say, wow, really? You know, the FBI, which it reportedly had dozens of agents looking into this, has reached its conclusion. Now we need to go through another, what, you know, 16-hour hearing with her. It's like, why don't they just, you know, sort of take what Comey gave them and make the most of it?
They can make this a campaign issue if they want and leave it to the voters to decide at the ballot box. Now, here's where I wish the Clinton campaign would maybe do it just a little bit differently. She has admitted that she made a mistake. She has admitted very recently that she has work to do when it comes to the trust question, that people don't trust her, and she acknowledges that. Now, this is actually could be an opportunity for her. She could step out there right now and say, look, the FBI said there was nothing illegal that happened, but that we made a lot of mistakes. You know what? They're right. I have said it. I will say it again. We have made a lot of mistakes, and I can't regret that enough.
Right.
Here's what, as president, I would do moving forward to make sure no one makes those mistakes ever again.
A full-throated
Donald Trump can't do that.
apology. And something that shows she really believes she made a mistake and proves it to the American people,
and
as opposed to like,
learned and grew from that experience, which Donald Trump can't do.
It was an opportunity. We'll look forward to hearing from her sometime within the next 7 months. That's how long it's been. So maybe we'll have to travel to wherever she is and shout some questions so we can actually get answers to some of these legitimate questions. Mo, always a pleasure, sir.
Thanks.
That's going to happen. So with these hearings 12 hours away, one of the top national security lawyers in this country, I think he is the top, is with us tonight on whether the FBI probe could pose serious issues for some of Mrs. Clinton's top aides. This is an interesting angle not being covered. Plus, Dana Perino is next on what she had to go through in the Bush White House to make sure the nation's secrets were kept safe. She made news today for an epic Twitter rant. And we'll talk to her about it. Oh, yeah, they like that. They like that. And then we have new video in a confrontation now getting national attention after police shoot a black man in a struggle. Reverend Jesse Jackson is here, along with Detective Mark Furman. Stay tuned for that.
I demand for the chief to be fired immediately. I demand that he resign if he has the guts.
In just hours, the director of the FBI will testify. in front of a House Oversight Committee for a, quote, emergency hearing on the Bureau's investigation into Hillary Clinton. Next week, lawmakers will be grilling Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who announced this evening that she, too, has decided that she will not bring any charges in this case. But before either of these hearings were confirmed, House Speaker Paul Ryan was telling the Kelly File that now is the time for Hillary to bear the consequences of what even the FBI called reckless actions.
I think the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, should block her access to classified information, given how recklessly she handled this during the presidential campaign. If she becomes president, that's one thing, but I don't think she should get classified information.
National security lawyer Mark Zaid and Dana Perino is also here. They'll both be with us in moments. But first, we go to our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, with more. Catherine?
Megyn, after the House Speaker told you Hillary Clinton's access to classified information should be blocked, today the White House responded.
When we're talking about the safety and security of classified information, we should leave those decisions in the hands of our intelligence professionals and not risk them being sullied by the political debate.
The FBI director was silent Tuesday on the Clinton aides, but said most government employees guilty of similar behavior would be punished. That typically includes losing their security clearance and the possibility of future government employment.
Those individuals are often subject to security or administrative sanctions, but that's not what we're deciding now.
The House and Senate Judiciary Committees want the FBI director to also explain how the investigators' finding back up his decision not to recommend criminal charges. And there are new questions tonight over whether Clinton misled Congress last year about the deletion of her emails. In this exchange with Republican Congressman Jim Jordan.
I'm asking how it was done. Did someone physically look at the 62,000 emails, or did you use search terms, date parameters? I want to know the specifics.
The search terms were everything you could imagine that might be related to anything, but they also went through every single email.
The lawyers doing the sorting for Secretary Clinton in 2014 did not individually read the content of all of her emails as we did for those available to us.
That's one of the issues we expect to hear a lot more about tomorrow, Megyn.
Catherine Herridge, thank you. Joining me now with reaction, Mark Zaid, a national security lawyer out of D.C. Mark, thank you for being here. So you represent people who get caught in these situations, and actually you say you have real concerns about what's going to happen to Hillary Clinton's aides, like her top aide, Huma Abedin, or Jake Sullivan, if she wins and goes to the White House. Explain.
Well, yes, I handle these cases all the time for the last 20 years, trying to help people dealing with clearance issues. And, I mean, Director Comey really set it forth. He indicated that they were grossly careless, and while it didn't rise to the level of prosecution, it very clearly, I think from his words, and that was an unprecedented press conference, created some very serious concerns in his mind. Now, they go through, including Secretary Clinton, go through the same vetting that individuals such as I do for security clearances. And one of the issues to look at is whether or not they have security violations, and very clearly they do.
How could they deny Huma Abedin or Jake Sullivan this access when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State, and if she becomes the president, of course she's going to have it. So how do you sort of kill the underling when the principal's getting the access?
Yeah, look, this is a very unique situation. I don't know of any other situation that one can even compare. I mean, there was a situation, I think, with Secretary of State Baker in the early 80s when on polygraph issues, it was sort of a clearance issue. One of his secretaries failed a polygraph, and he abolished the polygraph at the State Department. It still doesn't exist except in certain circumstances. I mean, the President of the United States generally never gets involved in these types of decisions. I don't think if Hillary Clinton won that she would either, I would hope. But, then again, there are professionals that will adjudicate these individuals' clearances at each of the agencies. And they could be denied access to SAP programs or SCI programs or
that's the super secret stuff.
Yeah, or even a clearance.
I need a quick answer on this. Do you think it's the right decision to call Comey before Congress?
No, I don't. First of all, as you mentioned in your prior segment, he's a very seasoned prosecutor. This was such an unprecedented press conference. I don't think he's going to go into any detail beyond it. He can't set a precedent for the FBI. And where is it going to go? I mean, what do they think anyone is going to say? I think the big loser that's going to come out of tomorrow are going to be both parties, because, you know, the Republicans are going to attack him and the Democrats are going to attack him, and everybody's going to look bad, and, you know, we'll see how he ends up. I mean, maybe he'll look the best out of everybody.
Mark Zaid, great to see you.
Yeah, pleasure. Anytime.
Well, as both sides dig in on the significance of this FBI report, former White House Press Secretary Dana Perino took to social media today to write about her experience protecting the nation's secrets when she worked in the West Wing, getting attention when she suggested that Hillary Clinton not only put the White House at risk, but also endangered the legacy of her own boss and the security of this country. Dana Perino is with me now, co-host of The Five, former press secretary for President Bush. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So you were uncharacteristically ticked off today.
Well, and I had Wi-Fi on the plane.
So what is it that's most irking you?
Well, it's just that I think that having a security clearance is such a privilege. You are entrusted with the nation's secrets. This isn't about you. When you work for the federal government, and especially at the White House or at her level, you work on behalf of the people. And so it wasn't that she was just trying to protect herself politically or for convenience. She was putting the nation at risk. She was putting her boss, President Obama, at risk. And it was just an extremely dishonorable thing to do. I do agree it's going to move on.
What does that show you about her?
I think that the Republicans' best argument is that the Clintons, especially Hillary Clinton, have always believed that they are above the law, that the laws that would apply to me, I would have been stripped of my security clearance like that, but I never would have done that because I cared too much about the job that I had.
It's that big a deal, in other words. When you get that security clearance, you start handling confidential, classified documents. It's a huge deal.
It's on your mind all the time. And people would ask me, when you're at the podium and you get a question from the press and you have classified information in your head, how do you avoid talking about it? And I said, oh, I have a steel box in my head. There's classified information in there that no one is ever going to get to, even to this day.
What do you make of what's happening tomorrow and what the Republicans, are they overplaying their hand?
Yes, in a way, but I understand also why they have to do it. You think the whole reason we know about this email situation is because of the Benghazi committee that Congressman Trey Gowdy put forward. That's the whole reason we found out about the private server. So there is a reason for Congress to have a chance to ask questions. I hope they don't do any grandstanding.
But that's the problem. That's what they always do.
They always do it.
They don't get real information.
They always do it. And, you know, when they read their questions that look staff prepared, if they're just sincere and honest and try to get to the information, I think that's fine. But I also think this. We've always known this is going to happen, that they're going to move on, and what Hillary Rosen said, move on, this is old news. That's going to happen, so everyone's going to move forward.
People care about.
That's right.
Which doesn't include
honesty. But they're wrong.
Honesty.
People do care about this, but I don't know if enough people care about this to deny her the presidency.
Well, I mean, I feel like the Republicans have what they're going to get. You know, that opening statement by Director Comey. Why don't they just take
just
it
quote his words? You don't have to say anything else.
Right?
Just quote from
Cut the ad, play the ad a lot, see whether it resonates.
And I think Comey knew that. I think he was trying to offer some sort of punishment.
I don't know. Listen, I know a lot of lawyers. I haven't heard any lawyer say anything other than you can trust him. He's a man of integrity. He doesn't make his decisions based on a partisan basis. Now suddenly you don't get the decision and you're like, people do this to judges all the time. He's the worst. He sucks.
Justice Roberts.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, that one was controversial, however, because the tax clause to save Obamacare, in any event, point taken. Dana Perino, always great to see you. That was weird. No one even argued it, the oral argument. It was like a throwaway line. What? Anyway, tonight, Donald Trump and Newt Gingrich are storming the Buckeye State, just as reports heat up that a VP pick appears to be just around the corner. Ben Domenech and Guy Benson are here with who Trump is likely to choose. Plus, we're keeping a close eye on an explosive situation in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where controversy is growing tonight over the police shooting of a black man earlier this week. Reverend Jesse Jackson and Detective Mark Furman join us live just ahead. Breaking tonight, presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump making headlines today as he drops multiple hints as to how and when he will choose his running mate. Tonight in Cincinnati, Ohio, Trump appeared at a rally with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, just hours after saying he's considering a short list of 10 people. In moments, we'll be joined by Ben Domenech and Guy Benson about who they believe Trump's going to choose. But first, we go to Fox's Mike Tobin, live in Cincinnati. Mike?
And, Megyn, right on the top of the list of things that Trump was talking about, doubling down on his Saddam Hussein comments, interpreted by some as praise for Saddam Hussein, because Trump said Saddam was good at killing terrorists.
Donald Trump loves Saddam Hussein. I said, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. So that's the narrative that goes around.
And as you mentioned, speculation is running wild about the VP pick. We know that Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee is out. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa seems to be out. Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey has a chance, as does Governor Mike Pence of Indiana. Congressman Jeff Sessions is on the list. The very top of the list, for the moment anyway, seems to be former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich. The crowd here in Ohio chanted Newt, 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 as Trump said one way or another Gingrich will be part of his administration. Possibly he could be the guy who helps Trump navigate Capitol Hill. Here in Ohio, Gingrich sang Trump's praises.
The difference between all the folks who came out and talked and Donald Trump is that he has had a lifetime of creating jobs, a lifetime of building buildings, a lifetime of getting things done. Everybody else talked about how he would like to sort of change Washington a little bit in a calm, such way. This guy's going to kick over the table.
Now, Trump heads tomorrow to Washington, D.C. to meet with Senate and House Republicans, particularly those who aren't too crazy about him. He will try to get their hackles up about Hillary Clinton and present himself as a better option. Megyn?
Mike Tobin, great to see you. Joining me now, Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, and Guy Benson, who's a Fox News contributor and a political editor at townhall.com. Great to see you both. So, Ben, I'll start with you. If you had to give me your top two likely from Team Trump, who would they be?
I think at this stage you have to consider the top two to include Newt Gingrich, to include Chris Christie, and I think that that's an interesting dynamic because these are two people who have been very significant surrogates for him on the campaign trail. What you want in a vice presidential selection is someone who's media savvy, who's tested, who's a known quantity, and who can be a good surrogate for the candidate. You heard Gingrich doing that just the other day. The difference between the two of them, I would say, is that Chris Christie actually has a background that is pretty checkered when it comes to issues like judges, whereas someone like Gingrich would reassure, I think, a lot of conservatives that when it comes to the Supreme Court nomination, they could trust a Trump-Gingrich ticket to deliver on those items. He certainly is making a play for it, and clearly wants it. And I think that this is a move that would be smart for Trump to make.
Smart. So it would help him secure the difficult white male vote that he's struggling so. Oh wait. I mean, that's what people are saying. Ben. I
didn't hear anybody on that list that was not a white male, and the one that was just given by her forward.
Listen, but I mean that assumes that logic by these pundits assumes that if he picks Joni Ernst, who took herself out of it today, the Iowa senator, that women are going to say, "I'm voting for Trump." Women who do women or African Americans or Hispanics really vote based on the gender or color or heritage of the running mate? I'll ask you that, Ben, and then I'll go to Guy.
It doesn't really work that way. From my perspective, what you see in this list that Trump, at least the names that have been publicly available, there's always the possibility that there's some dark horse out there that we're not talking about. I think a lot more of it has to do with enforcing his right flank, with making sure he doesn't lose any conservative votes who would have voted for Mitt Romney last time around when it comes to the fall.
Guy, do you agree Christie and Newt are likely the top two?
Well, look, I don't pretend to lay any claim to expertise on Donald Trump's psyche or thought processes at any time. That being said, I do think, based on what we've seen from Trump himself and from comments from Corey Lewandowski, the fired campaign manager, is that Trump was prioritizing two things in this search. The first is someone who's experienced in Washington, knows policy, knows D.C., knows how the inner workings all play out. He's also looking for someone with whom he is personally very comfortable. If those are the top two items or bullet points on the agenda, I think that probably points to Newt Gingrich.
What do you think of that ticket, Guy? What do you think of that ticket, Trump, Gingrich?
Well, I think that there would be some flaws. Newt Gingrich has some significant negatives that he brings to the table, including his unfavorability rating among voters. That being said, Newt has a lot of currency with many conservatives. He is fluent on policy issues and is very effective as a surrogate, and certainly would not have any compunction. In fact, he would relish being an attack dog against the Democratic ticket.
Can you imagine a debate with Newt Gingrich? People who tune in, that might get more ratings than that. No, it won't. Never mind. But I get a lot of ratings because he's a good debater. It's great to see you both.
Thanks, Megyn.
I mean, who doesn't want to see the Trump-Hillary debate, right? Who? Like, whatever you're doing, you'd cancel. It's like, whatever. You got to see it happen. Up next, we are monitoring the scene out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, after an officer-involved shooting of a black man sparks national outrage and a federal investigation already. Former LAPD homicide detective Mark Furman is here. Civil rights attorney Andell Brown are here. And then Reverend Jesse Jackson's here. Developing tonight, tensions high in Baton Rouge, Louisiana tonight. After less than 24 hours ago, Baton Rouge police responded to an incident outside of a local convenience store involving a reportedly armed man. Within minutes, a tense confrontation turns fatal as bystanders capture the incident on cell phone video. We want to warn you that the content is very graphic. Fox's Casey Stiegel is live in Dallas with the late-breaking details. Casey?
And Megyn, investigators say this all started when a 911 call was made about a disturbance at that Baton Rouge convenience store. The caller stated that there was a man outside selling CDs and that he threatened somebody with a weapon.
Gun in his pocket. He pulled a gun on a complainant and told him he couldn't be around there.
That's when two white officers responded to the call and confronted the African-American suspect, 37-year-old Alton Sterling. Now, a second video of what happened next has emerged, and again, we want to warn you, it is extremely graphic. It shows the two police officers rolling on the ground with Sterling, and then you hear those gunshots. The Baton Rouge police chief confirmed today that Sterling was indeed armed at the time, but it's not clear where his weapon was leading up to and during the confrontation. After the struggle, Sterling's lifeless body remained on the ground, and one of the officers called this into dispatch.
Drop far. The copy shot fired, no Foster. Play 100, no Foster. Both officers okay, put that down. I didn't use that 2-3.
Now, community outrage over the shooting sparked protest on the streets of Baton Rouge for 2 nights in a row now. In fact, it's still ongoing at this hour. Unfortunately, they have been peaceful at this point. This as Alton Sterling's family tries to cope with their sudden loss.
I, for one, will not rest or not allow him to be swept in the dirt.
Now, the two Baton Rouge police officers that were involved in this have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. An investigation we learned today that is now being led by the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI, Megyn.
Casey Stiegel, thank you. Joining us now with more, Mark Furman, former LAPD homicide detective and Fox News contributor, and Andell Brown, a defense and civil rights attorney. Great to see you both. Andell, let me start with you on what you see here, because already many people are saying that this was an execution.
You know, Megyn, that video is extremely difficult to watch as a man loses his life, a wife loses a husband, and his 5 children lose a father. What I see is officers approaching him and him with his hands up, seeming to wonder what is he being, approached for. Then I see him being tackled to the ground and officers pinning down his left arm, and 2 officers are on top of him. What is difficult to see from the videos that I've seen, I saw both the earlier video and the one that came out later today, is his right hand. I see one of the officers taking control of it for a certain point in time, but then I lose track of it when I see that video. One of the officers says, you know, I swear to, if you don't stop, if you move, and then the next thing you hear is some type of scream that you can't make out and gunshots being fired. In the second video, it's very clear that you can see that Alton does not seem to have any type of weapon in his hand, but you see him being shot in the chest numerous times, and once again, it's very difficult to watch.
But Mark, you know, we all have the luxury of sort of this armchair analysis and aren't there in the moment when someone says this guy has a gun and reportedly did have a gun on his person in his pocket, at least according to the initial reports. Your take?
Well, Megyn, when you look at this, we should talk about what we do know. The officers didn't see this suspect in suspicious behavior and then approach him. They were directed there by a radio call. A citizen was threatened with a weapon. So they go there, and when you watch the escalation of force, first they verbalized, and he failed to comply with the verbal commands. They used a taser. And that either didn't deploy correctly or didn't hit him correctly, but it was ineffective. Then they actually de-escalated the force that they could have used by tackling and trying to grapple with the suspect. Now, this man has to take responsibility that he did have a gun, and he conducted himself in some manner to draw attention to a citizen who called the police. And after that, the one officer, if this is the way it went down, one officer shot, one officer didn't, when you hear he's got a gun, if the other officer now uses deadly force, it's because he believes that that gun is in the hand or is attempting to be put in the hand of the suspect.
Andel?
I mean, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to cast aspersions on somebody who's not here to defend themselves and say what they, what they thought was happening. When an officer approaches you, I think it's just kind of normal to want to know, why exactly am I being told to get on the ground? Why exactly am I being approached in this aggressive manner? And I think many people in the community are on edge because they see these numerous situations, and it seems to be a very quick escalation without an opportunity for people to figure out what's going on. He's the CD guy, right? He's out there every day. The owner of the store knows him. They know he's not a bad guy. They know he's not a dangerous guy.
But the cops
Why don't the people
know.
who are policing his community know who he is? And he's there. And that's part of the problem. We need people in our communities that know the communities they're policing.
I got to go. Reverend Jesse Jackson is next. He says this is a public lynching. Developing tonight, the Department of Justice is already pursuing a civil rights investigation into the death of Alton Sterling. Earlier today, civil rights leader Jesse Jackson called this police shooting a public lynching. The Reverend Jesse Jackson is the founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition and my guest now. Reverend, good to see you tonight. This is disturbing. There's no question about it, and hard to watch. But to those who say...
Yes, it is hard to watch.
But to those who say that you go too far by referring to it in those judgmental terms before we know all the facts, what say you?
The fact we do know is a man was on the ground, held down by another police, shot in the back and in the chest at least 4 times. We know he was no threat to police who were involved in that.
We don't know
at one point it was...
That second part there, we don't yet know.
We see the camera is the eye. And the eye tells us that this man is down with no lethal harm to these police, if any threat to them at all. And now the whole world is watching. They didn't have to kill this man. And it's a pattern. It's so reminiscent of Garner in New York, where the police felt they had to choke him to death, that they had to shoot him 4 times with no threat to them. It's horrific.
Can you tar these officers with prior cases that they had nothing to do with, to ascribe motives to them? I mean, their defenders will say they were scared, that somebody said he had a gun, that they were there because somebody had reported feeling threatened by him and that he had a gun.
Well, somebody said is a poor excuse to shoot a man in the back and in the chest 4 times. That's a poor excuse. That's not good policing.
Well, that's just what set things off.
I said the force was excessive, it was unnecessary, and it was deadly. The only reason justification for police shooting someone is that they are threatening themselves, not his say, not they say. They killed this man, and when I grew up, it was white sheets and covered faces. Now it's audaciously blue uniforms. It is a pattern, and I think first the governor should be commended for moving immediately to bring in the FBI and justice, because they at least have more credibility in this situation. The second piece of this is that if he had shot them down on the ground, he would be arraigned tonight, not on administrative leave getting paid.
Why come out earlier tonight? You came out and you called them racist. Now that is a bridge too far, is it not? We have no idea what was in those cops' hearts.
Well, no, we know the culture. And we know that these two white cops arrived at some conclusions.
Come on. That's not fair to these guys. That's not fair.
These guys murdered
Isn't
a
it
man
racist
who was
to ascribe that sort of a racist motivation to these guys without knowing?
No. Their fears were unfounded, and in part, the stereotypes of an African-American male. On hearsay, they shot him 4 times on the ground. And Megyn, in this case, it's not hearsay, it's the whole world is watching.
Yeah,
so while we debate this, we trivialize the whole world is watching.
They're
this
watching,
is a
and we'll
murder,
continue watching.
They must
and
be
you and I will
tried.
continue this discussion another time. It's very good of you to be here tonight, sir. All the best.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll be right back. What did you make of the Reverend Jesse Jackson's statements just now? Go to Facebook.com/The Kelly File. Follow me on Twitter @Megyn Kelly. Let me know what you think. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I'm Megyn Kelly. This is The Kelly File. We'll see you tomorrow night at 9.